residents are protected. I'm hopeful that through a combination of the steps underway and ordinance like those on the agenda this evening, we can deter the surge of thefts in our township. I want criminals to know that Chatham Township is not somewhere that they can come to prey on our residents. Also on tonight's agenda, we are introducing our annual budget. The key points to note are, unlike the previous years, there is zero municipal tax increase contemplated in this year's proposed budget. Our debt service is reduced from prior years, and a renewed focus for capital spending on recreation and municipal facility improvements. Finally, I've asked for a review of this committee's bylaws to address several important issues. Foremost, our affordable housing attorney has made some key critical suggestions that may require bylaw adjustments. Under review are also public comment periods during our meetings, adjustments related to our expanded access to online platforms, requirements for presentations and presentation materials, as for appropriate visual aids in certain ordinance introductions, and a review of the overall order of business. These bylaw modifications will take a little time to work through, but a few meetings from now, I anticipate having a more comprehensive draft, ultimately to provide for a more productive meetings. Okay, can we go, or I guess the next, we have a proclamation this evening. This is the proclamation Week of the Young Child. Whereas the National Association for the Education of Young Children, in partnership with other state and local organizations, early childhood professionals, families, and children are celebrating the Week of the Young Child, April 2nd through April 8th, 2022. And whereas by calling attention to the need for high quality early learning experiences for all children and families within our city, these groups hope to improve the quality and availability of such services. And whereas the future of our city depends on the quality of early childhood experiences provided to young children today, preparing them for school success and brighter outcomes. And whereas creating experiences that schools to partner with their communities foster a relationship with agencies and programs in those communities. Those relationships can help support achieving goals in transitions, inclusion, and diversity. The Week of the Young Child creates awareness in our communities and establishes these relationships. And whereas high-quality early childhood services represent a worthy commitment to our children's future. And whereas a mixed delivery early childhood education system that allows our families to choose between quality and quantity when selecting the setting that best meets their needs. And whereas sufficient high-quality child care spaces beginning at birth to need to be available in the community. Now, therefore, I, Ashley Felice, Mayor of the Township of Chatham, New Jersey, do hereby proclaim April 2nd through April 8th, 2022 as Week of the Young Child in the Township of Chatham, New Jersey, and urge all citizens to recognize and support the needs of young children in our cities in order to build a brighter future for Township of Chatham by giving every child an opportunity to succeed in life. And did you want to come up and accept the proclamation? Thank you so much. Of course. Oh, yes. Okay, now we're going to go to, sorry, I skipped the approval of the agenda. So we're going to do that. Can I get a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved.
But can I just ask Greg? Greg, did you update the risk management resolution to match the contract price?
Yes, that was fixed.
Great, thank you. I'm good then.
Second.
Okay, roll call.
All in favor?
All in favor?
Aye.
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 All right, now we can go to reports. Stacy?
I'm afraid I don't have the senior center details, but I would encourage residents, as I had said before, they do have AARP representatives. They are helping with tax filings through the end of the tax season. So please, take advantage of that. And any other programs, definitely go on their website. They're always offering some really great programs, so I encourage you to take a look. The Mayor's Wellness Committee, they are excited to share their upcoming COIL, Conversation of Your Life, office hours event on April 7th, 2022 at 6 p.m., featuring small breakout rooms for attendees to ask and have any related questions answered by healthcare professionals and legal experts. And that's it on that one. That's it for my report.
All right, committee on the doctor.
Yes, as usual, I have a lot to report from the DPW. They finished the bumper guards on Shunpike 1 and 2. They started doing the spring cleanups on Shunpike Park. They put up both batting cages at Shunpike. They finished adding electrical outlets at Colony Pool. They removed and in the process of lowering the black border on the sand side of Colony Pool. They completed tables and benches for Colony. They started laying out soccer and boys and girls on Esternay. They continued tree work at parks and roads, and they continued replacing castings on roads to be paved. They did a salting operation on 312 at 10:45 a.m. And they are assisting tub grinder at the compost area. That the first day of compost is going to be April 5th coming up. And mulch deliveries are going to start on April 8th. Christie will start taking orders for delivery on March 28th. And residents must come to the DPW between 7 and 3 for delivery. I don't think they go there to pick up the mulch, but that they go there to pay for it. 3 yards is $25 and 6 yards is $50. We prefer all payments are made by check. If it is to be cash, we ask that the resident brings exact change. We cannot make change there. All mulch is double ground. All deliveries are made on Fridays. And they'll be delivering the mulch April, May, and June. And I also want to report that they almost completely rebuilt the park bench on the Green Village Green. And that's what I have for the DPW. The Environmental Commission, they have upcoming events. I won't go into all of them because they're later in the future. They have a tree seedling giveaway on April 23rd from 8:30 to 1 p.m. at the municipal building. And then the Historical Society also has a lot of upcoming events, but they're later on. But they are busy preparing for the schoolhouse centennial event on the 18th. And on April 24th, Kevin Doherty will give a Zoom presentation on the 100th anniversary of the Green Village Fire Department. And that's it.
Fantastic. And then Lois, do you have a report?
Yeah, but first, a point of information from our clerk. Craig, do you know the password for the Wi-Fi in this? Where am I in this?
There's a guest Wi-Fi that I don't think needs a password.
Oh, the guest Wi-Fi, no password.
I don't think so.
Okay. All right, so I have Colony
Actually,
Pool.
Bob is saying it's guest 1, 2, 3,
Or 1, 2, 3 guest.
or yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, best to check with me during business hours when I have the info available.
Okay, I just got the question. So, all right, so here we go. Colony Pool, early bird registration is open. And so we're building on last year's success. And if you want the best rates for 2022, you sign up for Colony Pool now. We have a new website for registration. And that website is linked to our township pages for Colony Pool. Also, if you're a past Colony member, you should have been receiving some emails, so you can check your email inbox or check our Facebook page where we have the links to that registration as well. And then from the Finance Committee, we are introducing the budget. As the mayor said, it's a 0% tax increase. This is an end to the progressive tax increases that we've had over the past 2 years, which have sum total in 20% tax increase. And so this is a nice counterbalance to that, where we can average down to something that seems to be closer to normative or rational. And we did this by debt restructuring, and by reducing the debt service by $411,000. And we also increased our capital expense from $167,000 to over $1 million. So we'll be able to pay for more of our investments in capital projects in cash and rely less on debt going forward. I wanted to just emphasize that the 0% tax increase, the debt restructuring, the increase in capital is achieved. We did not cut employees, we did not cut hours, we didn't cut pay, we didn't cut budgets to departments. So we did this with better thinking. And I'm very hopeful that we could see even more of this in next year's budget.
Thank you for that, and Deputy Mayor Hamilton.
Thank you. Well, program package agenda today, and I'm sure we're eager to get to the budget presentation, so I'll be brief. Speaking of budgets, the school district in Chatham is in the process of rolling out its budget also, which is a matter of extreme importance for all taxpayers in Chatham, whether you have kids in the schools or not, and details regarding that are available on their own website. I encourage you to check that out. As far as the Public Safety Committee, the mayor's statement at the beginning of tonight's meeting really spoke to that. So I'll just report that we are working collaboratively with the chief and as a committee to make sure that we have appropriate staffing on our force due to upcoming retirements and other issues. We currently have two candidates in the police academy who are doing very well, and there's going to be a resolution on the agenda later tonight to also bring in a new patrolman. Lock your cars. And just as far as the library goes, the big the big fundraiser for the Friends of the Library was yet again a smashing success. The book sale. I'm not going to steal their thunder and announce what I know about the totals, but a tremendous amount of money was raised. I think they're in the process of counting it, and we'll be making a formal presentation in the near future. But once again, that was a great success. So thanks to the Friends and to everybody who came out and supported that. And I was also given a note that the library diversity project will be launching on April 3rd at 3 p.m. with the ceremony at the library. And that's all I got.
All right. So now we come to the public hearing of citizens. This is an opportunity for any member of the public to be heard about any issues that are not topics scheduled for public hearings tonight. Our public hearing of citizens is guided by the Governor of New Jersey's executive orders. At this time, the committee meeting room is open to the public, and we look forward to having you join us.
But we may want to report some of our professionals first.
Oh, I'm sorry. Was any of our professionals when we were, but I always forget that. Always. Sorry about that.
Turn on the microphone.
Just briefly, I'll just give some updates and just also mention on the consent agenda, there is a resolution regarding solicitation of consultants for the DOT project. And I did receive a positive feedback from the DOT regarding their funding of that portion of the project, because under the federal requirements, they require full-time inspection of the contractor. And they in these circumstances, they don't typically give a definite answer. They have to wait until you present them with a specific cost, and we won't know the specific cost until we go through the process. But they did a very positive response. It indicated that they will fund that. So this is a very specific requirement that we have to go through. It follows the federal requirements of the Brooks law, and then we actually go out for RFQs, and then we select a consultant based on solely qualifications, and then we negotiate a fee, and then we present that to the DOT, and so that's the process. So very encouraging that they were getting, because that's not something that they offer to every project. It's something that we pursued and was able to get their concurrence on it. So it was good news. And I have been pushing because I've kind of seen the DOT kind of finally rallying behind me of trying to push these safe routes to schools projects forward, and they just approved the Shunpike 2016 grant to go to final design, and the consultant said that their schedule was 6 months, and I'm pushing back, 6 months for a simple cycle project shouldn't take that long, so we're just, hopefully we'll try to get, that moving a little faster, and we start to see some progress on those projects. Paving, DPW is continuing to work on the roads, and we're continuing to secure the DOT approval to move forward with the most recent grant application. And when we have reached out to Long Hill in the past, I'll reach out to them again. My last correspondence with them, that they were going to review the roads that we're paving, and to only make sense for them to pave it at the same time, and so I'm sure they have to go through their budget process also and things. So having gotten a firm commitment from them, and hopefully don't wait till the last minute, but we'll coordinate that. And lastly, I'll just note that Bob asked me to get involved with the tennis courts, and so we're going to need to take a look at the improvements at the tennis courts, and we'll look at how we want to present that to the committee, and what our recommendation would ultimately be. When you're looking at tennis courts, you really have to look at how often are the courts used, and how the seriousness of the players and things like that. So you have to take that in consideration, and you have to consider that they are used by the Board of Education, so they are being used quite a bit. And so there's different techniques we can use to look at on the different repairs, and unfortunately they come with a price tag. So if we look at a simple repair of the cracks and just recode the system, you're in the $100,000 range of doing that work. But if we do more extensive improvements, that and the more extended improvements is really going to, we certainly have cracks already, and the pavement is old. We paved about 15 years ago. And so the pavement, we probably should have done improvements well in advance of this. We really should have done improvements less than 10 years ago. When the courts were less than 10 years old, we should have done some improvements, but it kind of got delayed. But certainly we can. The cracks are present. It's a matter of addressing the cracks, and that's what's key, and how quickly the cracks will come back. So we do the most least expensive, the cracks will probably come back relatively soon, like a hairline fracture, and then you'll start to see the cracks start to open up again, but it'll take a couple of years before it's a problem. And then if you look at resurfacing, and that's a more expensive option. It's more in the $260,000 range if we resurface the courts and then do the recoding, and that certainly is a better option, and it gives you a longer service life. We'll see the cracks won't come back as soon, but and then the last is reconstruction. The last reconstruction is very expensive. It's probably in the $500,000 range. So we need to seriously start to look at, what's the best option, what's the best value to move forward and correct those. So, Bob and I will coordinate and actually pull in a couple of consultants but contractors that do this work that I've worked in the past, and have them look at it also, get their feedback on their recommendations. They're ultimately will be looking for pricing and getting guarantees on the work, and so I want them to feel comfortable with that. So we'll hopefully get this going quickly so that we can get the courts in great shape as soon as possible.
Great.
John, just so I can understand, so we're saying we're going to spend $100,000 to patch the courts, which buys us 2 years, and then potentially we're looking at resurfacing for $240,000.
Probably closer to two. Yeah, I'm sorry.
Was that what you were saying?
Well, no, I was just saying that, the different degree of the degree at which we repair the courts is going to be, you're not going to eliminate the cracking just by doing a crack repair and doing the recoding. The cracks are going to come back. They're not going to be as severe. And for a municipal court that doesn't get a lot of practice, that may be something that would be appropriate for the courts. However, the courts do get a lot more practice, so we should be seriously looking at doing possibly some additional repairs. But we have to weigh, the value of doing that additional cost, and so that would be milling the surface course out, and you repair the base course, and then you put the surface course back, and then the coating, and the cracks will eventually come back, but they'll probably be several years before you really start seeing any significant deterioration of those cracks again. And again, the most, if you truly want to eliminate the cracks altogether, it's a reconstruction, but that is a very significant undertaking to consider just, for that. So we'll have to weigh those options, look at the financing and see what would be the best recommendation to make to the committee.
Thank you.
I have a question. With regard to the cracks, is it a dangerous condition? Is it greater declination than half an inch?
I don't believe so. I haven't looked at the course more recently, but I know that a few years back, this is not a new issue that came up, and I think the DPW went out and sealed the cracks, and the cracks are, in fact, they're not not differential sediment where it's a tripping hazard. It's just a crack level, but they're generally level. So
I think the high school plays on those courts.
yeah, I know that. Yeah, I think they practice. I'm not sure what they.
Yeah, the high school does play on there. They practice there every day during the tennis season, and they do have varsity and junior varsity
Both
matches.
boys and girls.
Yes.
It's a possibility that it could be a hazardous situation though.
Yes.
Yeah, I haven't seen it recently. I had to look at that, but
We are very lucky though that there's not much mounding or ponding situation there, so that indicates that we're probably not in a hazardous situation, but we definitely should look at that.
Great. Any other professional, Greg, do you have a report?
No.
Bob, do you have a report?
Yes, Mayor, I'll make it, I have a couple items to cover. One of the items is that there's a resolution on the agenda. It's resolution 2022-110. It's the energy tax receipts. And I asked that the Township Committee adopt this resolution. I believe it's vitally important. This is the contribution that the state gives to the township. This is actually money that has always been in the township. This goes back to the 1880s. And then in the 1980s, the state had a better idea. They were going to collect the tax and redistribute it. But this, the energy tax receipts have stayed flat for the township since 2011. So since 2011, or for the past 12 years, we have received $836,467. And that's what we anticipate in our budget. But when you look at what should have happened with this, with the energy tax receipts, it should be more. And this contributes to some of our budgetary constraints, not just here, but at the municipal level for all across the state. So I just asked the Township Committee to adopt that resolution. I wanted to piggyback on what committee member Lois talked about with the Colony Pool. There was very good work that was being done with the marketing group as well as with some internal staff so that we can get the new website up. We are ahead of last year, but we are not ahead of schedule. So it's been a team effort, and it's exciting to see what's happening now and what will happen in the future. Also wanted to officially let the township know that last week Moody's gave the township a AAA credit rating. This is something that was vital. It's few municipalities in the state do receive a AAA credit rating, but this will help with our bond sale, which is scheduled for right now, and will close in the beginning of April. But this is part of the township's long-term plan on how to work smarter, how to leverage what we have coming up, what our cash flow is, as committee member Lois mentioned. But this helps the township work, and it also is an affirmation for Moody's that we are doing something well, and we're doing something that not many other municipalities have done. And this is kudos to our finance team. So it's the finance committee, which is Committeewoman Ewald, committee member Lois, but it's also our CFO, our auditor, our bond counsel. There's a whole group of people behind there, and it took a lot of work to get there, but I just wanted to acknowledge that. So
No, I think
thank you for that.
Thank you, and I think we absolutely need to acknowledge our entire finance team for that tremendous efforts, and thank you all very much as well. All right, anybody else have a report? Am I good? Okay, now we are opening up the hearing of citizens. Just gonna skip to opportunity for any member of the public to be heard about any issue that are not topics scheduled for public hearings tonight. At this time, the committee meeting room is open to the public, and we look forward to having you join us. Additionally, this meeting is being made available for public participation remotely. If you're watching cable TV on Comcast Channel 29 or FiOS Channel 26, you can participate in the public comment section of this meeting by dialing the phone numbers which are listed on the agenda and which are shown on your TV screen. Please dial *9 to raise your hand. If you are watching via Zoom, you may speak during the public comment session by following the Zoom instructions to raise your hand. Whether in person or online, when you are recognized to speak, please say your name, spell your last name, and give your street number. As a reminder, all public comments will be limited to 5 minutes. Rather than use any of your time answering questions, we will wait until you finish speaking before responding. Each member of the public will be limited to 1 comment during the public comment period. Written comments submitted to the township clerk before 3 p.m. today will be read during the public comment sessions. Written comments are subject to the same guidelines as oral comments, and duplicative written comments may be summarized rather than read in full according to guidelines issued by the New Jersey Division of Local Government Services. Greg, are there any written comments?
No.
All right. Anybody?
Good evening, Maureen Kelly.
I don't have batteries because the ones I had got stolen from here, so
Can we?
that takes two, unfortunately,
It's okay.
they all.
It's okay.
Just,
Okay.
You're just gonna have to speak up.
Just speak.
All right, I can speak up. So Maureen Kelly, Mountain Avenue. Couple of comments. First, I read the agenda, looking for those reports that have been promised from the Diversity Committee, the Business Committee, and the Affordable Housing Committee. I don't see them on the schedule yet, so I'd be anxious to know when that's going to happen. Because we have this 1 comment per meeting time, it's a little awkward here to comment on a budget presentation that hasn't been made yet. So I'm going to take a stab at it with a couple of comments. First of all, there's a lot of harping about the past township committees and raising the taxes by 20%. That's all true. However, it really lacks context. I just looked at my tax bill, and really the municipal portion that you guys have control over is well less than 20% of the total tax. So while it is true the tax has gone up, it's really not a major part of anyone's tax bill. What you need to look at, as Mr. Hamilton suggested, was pay more attention to the school budget, because about 67% of your property tax dollars go to support the school. So I think it lacks context. The other thing is that suddenly this year, that 2% open space tax is suddenly a good thing. But Ashley and Mark Hamilton voted against it last year when they voted down the budget. Also, they didn't like the development tax, and that's raising a lot of money. That's really going to help us out with affordable housing commitments. It's raised, I think, $800,000 so far. And I haven't seen that builders are reluctant to build in Chatham. There's building going on everywhere. So what I want to say is that everything that the finance committee, et cetera, has done this year is really resting on the good planning that went on ahead of, put you in a good position to, I haven't seen any cuts to the budget, so you must like the tax rate the way it is. So that's what I would like to say, and I look forward to Bob's presentation of the budget. Thank you.
Thank you.
What?
Move it out of the way
Yes.
so you can see.
Sure. All right. Just didn't catch on quickly. My name is Stuart Carr.
1 second.
Yeah.
Mr. Carr.
Yeah, I just want to respond to the 1.5% developers fee. It definitely is funding affordable housing, paying the developers trust is helping with that. There is a counterbalance there, and we are working with the affordable housing attorney who's an expert in that and has helped to reapprove allocate and sort of change our plan there. But what I think you should look at though is added assessed values over time. We have had an impact. There is a slowing and it's precipitous and it's over a multi-year period in Chatham Township of added assessed values. And that's something that I definitely want to take on and look at and look to turn around. It's a trend that's happened and added assessed values are down by quite a bit. So we're down 40 million down to 29 million in the last 3 years. So that would be added building and improvements.
Also regarding the Open Space Act, I think it's important to note that this was the first year that we made a significant effort to use a portion of that money for the maintenance and improvements of our existing open space, not just the way it was always described to us was to just purchase land, but we actually made the conscious decision this year to use it to make improvements that were, I think, were significantly needed. So
I'll just add one other thing on that is that not only did we supported the 2 cents, the full open space tax, but we also reversed the decision that was made to pay off a large amount of debt with existing open space cash. So we preserved $740,000 in that open space fund that we have. So and we didn't use it to extinguish debt. Instead, we rolled that, restructured it into debt, and at the same time brought our debt service down overall from 1.54 million. So that we brought our debt down and we brought our debt service down, both at the same time. And we brought debt service down $411,000 this year from a 1.54 million. And what we did with open space specifically was we preserved the 740,000 as opposed to extinguishing it into simply paying for the past.
okay. Yep, yes.
Good evening. My name is Stuart Carr, CARR from 3 Crestwood Drive in Chatham Township. A couple of items. First, a procedural item, and piggybacking on Mr. Hamilton from the other night. Mr. Hamilton asked once, twice, I think maybe 3 times to Mr. King, can we talk about the two meetings for 2 public comment periods versus 1? He asked once, got a dodge. He asked a second time, got a dodge, maybe even been a third time. Mr. King, he said, could we do it? Mr. King said, well, it's not a best practice. Then Mr. Hoffman says, can we actually do it? No, I'm sorry, Mr. Hamilton. Can we actually do it if we wanted to? Again, we have a dodge. It's not a best practice. Finally, Mr. LeConte comes in and says, yes, we have done that. Yes, we can do that as a matter of procedure. So I'd like it if Mr. King perhaps could actually answer a question from the dais instead of dodging it and not waste Mr. Hamilton's time or other people's time to have to ask the same question 2 or 3 times. Now, you may not recall it, Mr. Hamilton, but you asked it once, then you diplomatically asked it a second time, didn't get an answer a second time. He chimes in and finally gives the answer. So procedurally, it's just a waste of people's time.
I'll let you finish and then I'll respond.
Okay, cool. Well, I'm supporting you for change on that, but in any case, not for a change, but I support you on that item, which I thought was the way you referenced it. No, not for a change. No, I usually support it. In any case, number 2 item is the letter of December 11, 2019 from Mr. Hoffman to US EPA. Would like to get again an answer about whether that has been rescinded. First, we were going to ask about it, then we got no answer, then it was a legal strategy. This is something, again, is not a legal strategy as to whether this was actually rescinded or not. It does directly implicate and impact the discussions now between the CAG and US EPA and the Department of the Interior. So it's something the public has to know, or would like to, not has to know, they have to know, because if we're talking about potentially opening up that area in the Rolling Nose landfill to public access at some point, assuming Neely agrees and a bunch of other things come into play, that we have to know whether Chatham Township is on the same page or not. If this letter is still out there, that unequivocally supports option 3, which is not what the public is looking at this point. So we'd like to know if this is still in effect or if it has actually been rescinded. So if we can get that answer sooner rather than later, that would be appreciated. Number 3 item, library. Sent a memo to the township and the borough committees asking for Mayor and mayor to get together about talking about getting a public question about whether the public wants to underwrite $3 million or whatever the number is of the gap between what the library of the Chathams has raised and what they need to do a fully loaded project. It may not make sense, it may make sense, but the idea of having a public question takes the tax increase off of your deck and puts it in the public domain. If the library of the Chathams can come in and make the case that it makes sense to have a capital project and the public should underwrite it because it couldn't get enough in the way of philanthropy, then that would be the public to say yes or no. And I think it's appropriate for the public to get that opportunity to do so, for the two mayors to get together and figure out how to propose that to the public at some point in time. Then the library can stop their project and for a little while, go out to the public, see if they can make the case. And then at that point, maybe have enough money to do the fully loaded project, as opposed to the kind of half-baked project that appears to be, not half-baked, but a smaller scale project right now. So if Mayor Felice, if you could check and see, or if you could comment on whether you did speak with Mr. Kovalars and what the status is of that discussion to figure out whether the public would be well served to have a public question concerning funding of the library. And then number 4, Mr. Lois, a disagreement and an agreement. First of all, a little bit piggybacking here. I disagree here, and I agree. So that's agreed, then disagree, then agree. I do agree that the muni budget is a small portion of the total budget, but the muni budget is 16, 17 million bucks, which is a big deal. So we should be focused on what we can control. And if it is 20%, it is 20%. To say, well, it's really only 3% because it's an $80 million take, or whatever our bigger total number is really not the case. We should focus on the 17 million. If it was 20%, then Mr. Lois, again, I agree with him. That's a good thing to focus on. The place I'd like to catch on to, though, is since it was so egregious over the last couple of years as 12% and 8% tax increases, then clearly now, since it was such a waste to raise the tax rate, presumably we should be able to lower our taxes now because it was such wasteful spending. But it sounded like we raised it by 20%. Now we're going flat. So I don't hear anything about actually coming down to take away some of that wasteful spending that these people did over the last couple of years. So if we can speak to that a little bit, and then I might get close to the time. Okay, I'll get out of here. And then the issue of the debt, the same thing. It raised 30%. Where are we going on that part? And then finally, real quick, Mr. Lois, I do agree on the cap bank dimension. The idea there where, again, if you take the 2% and ride it each year, you can just soak up the budget. The idea if we have something lower than 2%, we can then bank it for the next year. I wholeheartedly agree with Mr. Lois that we should be able at the next year to justify that budget. And if we need more than 2% that next year, ask the taxpayers. Going back and taking last year's money to bank for next year or the year after, again, we could do that. And it is, as Mr. Hoffman said, apologies for getting that mixed up. As Mr. Hoffman said, it is convenient, but again, it cuts the taxpayers out. So having prudence 1 year and then being able to go back and say the next year, if we need more, let's ask for it. Let's do that. So I agree with Lois. I don't know if you guys are going to agree with him. Thanks so much. Appreciate it.
The one thing I do want to say, well, we're not allowed to lower the taxes because we took the federal CARES Act money. So that is, we're not allowed to.
Yeah. There are certain parameters that we're not allowed to because we took, the CARES Act, the COVID money. But there's also the issue of, yes, taxes went up 20% and it was way too much. I've never stated publicly or would I say that it was wasteful spending because it wasn't my time to make those decisions. I think there's more creative thinking that can be done. And there's the kind of things that you'll see in tonight's budget presentation, and that happened with the debt restructuring that we talked about in the last meeting. I think those things can be done. But when you have a simultaneous situation where you've raised taxes 20%, the state of our fields and our public spaces are the way they are, so the cupboards are sort of bare, and you've raised the debt from a 9, 10, 11 million to an 18 million, $18.8 million. When you've done all three of those things, you sort of run it down, the municipal building roof is leaking, you've run down the facilities, you've raised the taxes, and you've run out, you've blown out the debt. That's where that's why I frankly got involved. That's why I ran, that's what I campaigned on, and ultimately that's what I won on. And I'm working very hard to deliver for people. In terms of turning around to a tax cut right away, we'll take care of these issues structurally, and then we might get there. We'll find out.
Real quickly, again, we say that we have the taxes.
You only get 5 minutes.
But I,
Thank you.
Thank you.
Keep on up, sir.
regarding the.
Yeah,
lot-
I just wanted to clarify a point that Mr. Lois made. I think it's important to be fully transparent to residents and to make sure they fully understand what's taking place. So, Mr. Lois, I agree completely. Debt service has increased as a decrease as a result of the restructuring by about 411,000. That's related, some of that is related to timing with interest payments and when they're due. Some of that, about 200,000, will come back next year. The other part that's been communicated to residents, which I don't want them to be misled, is that debt has decreased, gross debt and net debt has decreased. That messaging is out there. The only way debt is going to decrease is by making payments or by forgiveness. We did not get loan forgiveness. And the models that were sent out contemplated the normal principal payments that are going to be made this year. We are actually taking on additional debt this year, and residents need to understand that. We have about 4 million in capital projects planned. About 2 million of that will be financed through debt. So at the end of the year, there will not be a gross or a net debt decrease. It might be flat, probably be a modest increase. So I want to make sure that we're clear when we're sharing information with residents on the facts.
My turn? I got a lot to unpack there. As far as the procedural questions, I'll be honest, at the beginning of your discourse there, I wasn't sure what you were talking about, because I don't have any recollection of asking Mr. King if we could switch to separate public comment periods, but now I recall, it goes back to me, what I asked Mr. King very directly was if it was possible, setting aside the possibility of it being possible, whether, appropriate, to, one-off modify our bylaws on a willy-nilly basis, meeting by meeting, as opposed to adopting the bylaws for a year at the organizational meeting in January and then sticking with those bylaws for the year. And the answer I got was that it's not, and I agree that it's not a best practice. And I was fully satisfied with that answer. And that, we agreed as a committee unanimously to adopt the bylaws that are currently in place at the organizational meeting just 2 months ago. And those are the bylaws we agreed to for the year. That said, the mayor spoke earlier tonight about, possibly undertaking a review of a couple different aspects of the bylaws. And if there was going to be some sort of more comprehensive, reworking or something, that's more of a longer term project. It may be appropriated at the mid-year mark or something like that. So we'll be working on that. But I was certainly perfectly satisfied with the response that I got from our attorney about that. As far as you had a point about the library, I'll get to that too. But was there another one that was specifically? Okay, well, just real quick, as far as they already touched on the point about lowering taxes, you can't lower taxes, and frankly, I don't think it's really productive to do this sort of, for lack of a better word, petty kind of political bantering on this committee where we're trying to conduct the business of the town. But to the extent it comes up, I think anybody can go back and check the record, and I think Mrs. Felice and I were crystal clear last year, not that we were opposed in an absolute theory to the 2 cents for open space, but that we were opposed to the 2 cents for the sake of the 2 cents, just for this committee to stockpile money into what was effectively a slush fund, or to inefficiently early pay down debt at favorable rates that didn't need to be paid down. There was no purpose for this extra money that was brought in last year, and that was why we were opposed to it. This year, we're undertaking a fundamentally different program of not just stockpiling money for the sake of having it just in case some property becomes available for open space acquisition, but to actually use that money affirmatively to make real significant improvements to our open space facilities that are already open to and used by township residents. So it's comparing apples to fire trucks. It's a totally different scenario entirely. So as far as the library, oh, I knew there was one other one, the MOU. How could I have forgotten that? Come on, heard about it so many times. Well, the answer to your question, I wasn't really sure if it was a yes or no question, has it or hasn't it? I thought the answer to that was clear. I thought it was more a question of will it or won't it? The answer to your question is no. The letter that went out in 2019 has not been rescinded. It's still out there. And for a variety of reasons, the strategy that the committee, I believe is in consensus on it is that we're not going to be calling attention to that or fundamentally withdrawing that position necessarily at any time in the future, in the near future, as of right now. That doesn't change the fact that we also entered into the MOU with a number of other parties, including the PRP group and the other people. Okay, and we have entered into the MOU, and that is something that we see as a goal, and that's a matter of public record as well. And as far as the library goes, we got your letter, or I got your letter, thanks for that. I haven't had an opportunity to speak to the mayor about this directly yet, but I feel no qualms with speaking publicly about my view on it, which is these questions are not necessarily questions of throw it to the public to decide. But what that really means is let a slim minority, majority, or plurality of the public who could be motivated to come out and decide. It doesn't necessarily represent the whole community, and you can't just govern like that with having if you can get 51% of the people who come out for an off-year municipal question election to approve something, then everybody's getting hit with a $3 million tax bill. I think the members of this committee are elected to sort of oversee those kind of policy decisions, and the voters who vote for us understand what our views are generally on taxes and tax increases, and that's not something that I personally would support. And I have no qualms with just letting you know that up front, and anybody else who's watched it.
Great. Is there anybody on Zoom?
Before we get to that, since I was referenced in the
Oh,
previous
yes.
comments. So with the bylaws, while I do agree that they can be modified throughout the year, I also agree with Mr. King that it would not be a best practice to do it on the fly. I think my comment at the last meeting was in reference to making sure that we have a written version rather than just sort of on the
Well,
fly.
what I addressed earlier this evening, is essentially we're gonna have a committee look at all of our bylaws.
Yeah, I just,
And evaluate everything, because there are some changes that have been recommended by our affordable housing attorney to make. So when we do it, we want a full comprehensive review.
yeah, I just want to clarify my comments that,
No
well,
problem.
yes, they can, but we should, have
It
the
should
committee
be-
know exactly.
Well,
what you're voting on.
that's the plan. Yeah, all right, so we can move on to Zoom.
We have, first up is Dot Stillinger.
Yes, hello. My name is Dot Stillinger, 216 Noe Avenue in Chatham Township. My email address is D as in dog, K as in key, Stillinger @gmail.com. That's dkstillinger@gmail.com. Please email me, anybody listening, if you want to discuss anything with me. Glad to talk. And I appreciate your listening to me tonight. It's, of course, people call in to disagree and to nitpick and to complain, and of course, I'm going to do that too. But I have to say that the ordinance you passed about the Drew Forest was absolutely the right thing to do. And I also would like to say that any support we can give the library would be just as righteous and something to keep in mind. I am gonna complain a little bit though, and my concern is the lack of transparency concerning the fate of the Rolling Knoll Superfund site, what we used to call the Mealy Dump. The residents of the township have a right to know what their government is doing to make that 140-acre open space a benefit to them. There's something going on here and we're not hearing anything about it. That property is between Nashfield and the Great Swamp National Wildlife Refuge. It has birds and wildflowers, but currently the EPA is planning a minimal cleanup, leaving most of the trash in place and surrounding the property with a fence and no trespassing signs. That's just not believable. We would have no possibilities of trails. We're not trying to put houses there for people to live. We just want trails, but we're not getting information. Right now, the only information shared with the public by the township is a link to an EPA website. No information available at all about what the township itself is doing to make the property accessible to residents. If you look at that EPA website, it has some photos of the Rolling Knoll site, and they're gorgeous. That property is gorgeous. Now, several of the township committee members have never even attended one of the public Zoom meetings with the EPA. They're public meetings. Anybody can join. The next one of those public meetings is March 29th. The link to the meeting is on the Great Swamp Watershed Association's website, and anyone can join the meeting. Residents have a right to know what's being done for them, to know if their town will be left with a dirty, minimally cleaned up Superfund site not too far from their residences. Property values could be impacted. Yes, they would have to say, the residents would have to say, when asked, there is actually an off-limit Superfund site in this town. Residents need to be informed by the town right now what their government is doing about this. That there's an issue about property taxes, property values. If the town has a real Superfund site in the middle of it, relatively near residences, how does that impact property values? Anyway, it's not enough to say that this is somehow privileged information, somehow legally there's nothing to say. There certainly can be things to be said by the township committee to tell the people a little bit about what's going on there. It's just not reasonable to go ahead, do nothing, and let the EPA get by with basically a cheap so-called cleanup. And my last remark is, sometimes I don't know how you guys can stand to come in here for meetings twice a month. On the whole, I think your hearts are in the right place. And of course, we all hope we can change your minds about the things we're interested in. Thanks again for listening.
Thank you very much. The one thing I will say is that I can assure you all 5 committee members have been following along with what's going on with the CAG meetings. We have an attorney that is also advising us throughout this entire process, and we're following along. Just because we're not actually in attendance to the meetings does not mean we're not following along. It's also replayed on YouTube, and I can assure you that everybody is following along with what's going on with that. Next person.
Next up is Jen McNally. Jen?
Yeah, hi, Jen McNally, 100 Noe Avenue. Thank you, Dot Stillinger, my neighbor down the street, for getting things started. I just have a casual observation from the meeting tonight and a quick question. So I was sitting here, I keep hearing about our 20% increase in taxes, 20% increase in taxes last year. Well, I've had some time during the public comment to go into public records. Our taxes went up 20% last year. Mr. Lois, your taxes would have gone up $2,400. Other people in the community's taxes would have gone up $2,000, $9,000, $4,200, and $2,800. So I find it hard to believe that our taxes went up 20%. A small sliver of our taxes went up 20%. So it's a real misrepresentation. The There are a lot of people who are on this call who may not usually tune in because it's a budget meeting tonight. So to say that our taxes went up 20% would mean that your taxes went up $2,400 last year. So maybe if you can confirm that for me, then that statement will be true. A slight sliver of our taxes went up 20% last year. As it was said earlier, 65 cents of each of your tax dollars goes to our school system. The remaining 35 cents goes to Morris County and to Chatham Township. There's a slight part of that budget of the 35 cents that got raised over the last 2 years. That money was for our affordable housing. Had we collected our developer's fee over the last 11 and 12 years, we would not have had to have had these increases like that. So to say our taxes went up 20% is a gross overstatement. A slight sliver of our taxes went up 20%. That was about $220 or $240 a house for the last 2 years. So if I could believe that your taxes went up $2,400 last year, then our taxes did go up 20%. So I think that's something that we need to explain and make sure that people know that 65 cents of each dollar that you pay in taxes doesn't even go to the township or to Morris County. It's 35 cents, and a slight sliver of that budget went up that part. So I think that's something that we continue to hear repeated and repeated and repeated. And if you repeat something so much, it becomes the truth. So I don't think that the fact that there's a 20% increase is the actual truth. A slight sliver went up 20%. And I think that's really important for people to know and understand. And I think the other thing that was brought up earlier was also our citizen committees. We had in December on the schedule of the meetings in the end of last year that our 3 citizen committees were going to do presentations. And I think each of the committees was told that that was going to be rescheduled. And I don't think I've seen that on the agenda either. So that's something I would like to see. Hopefully a lot of people spent a lot of time last year working on those committees, and to have that rescheduled would be something, to show the respect to the people who spent all their time last year. And that was supposed to be rescheduled in December, and now that it's March and we haven't seen that yet. And so that's there. So this 20% is a huge misnomer. A slight sliver went up 20%, not your overall taxes, because I think if people's taxes went up that much money, I think you would have a long line for this public comment. So that's it. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I just think it's wildly inappropriate for anyone to call in and discuss anyone's personal financial situation. So,
I'd like to address the 20% increase in taxes, because it's really, I'm kind of tired of hearing it, and let's just cut to the chase. But more importantly, I want residents to understand what was put in place to put us in a better position. A big driver of that 20% tax increase was our affordable housing obligation, resolving that affordable housing obligation. That was a big driver of the debt increase as well. By implementing the developer fee in 2019, we are finally seeing that we could pay the debt service and some of the other obligations that buried our budget the last couple of years by that revenue that's being generated. So that's a positive thing that occurred by putting in the developer fee. We also had structured debt payments that were the result of having 16 million in bond anticipation notes, where there was minimum payments made over the course of the 10 years that you can carry a bond anticipation note. In restructuring that debt, we won't have those large, shocking principal payments all of a sudden that are due. So that is going to be a big help as well. The last piece was the open space tax, increasing it from 1 cent to 2 cents was another driver of that 20% increase. While the original decision, well, first of all, going back, the only thing that open space tax was used for was to pay down debt. The decision was made to start to put money aside. And that's why that pool of funds is available to do something. There was never the ability to have a discussion about, there are funds in the open space trust, what can we do with this money? We're heading in a good direction. I give Mr. Lois credit because we'll talk about this a little more later, but the dynamic is shifting in terms of how that open space trust is used. I think residents will appreciate that shift. But I want people to understand what the driver was and what was put in place to mitigate those factors going forward.
I wanted to say that the only thing about restructuring of the debt and a long discussion about restructuring of the debt is that, unfortunately for our residents, $12 million of that restructuring could have happened last year, and it could have happened at a much more favorable rate structure than what we have today. We still have historically low interest rates. We're still in a good position. However, last year, had we had some of that debt been restructured last year, this savings could have been captured then. And at last year, you would have been at least 1 percentage point, full percentage point lower. And when you're talking about low interest rates, like what we're going to be able to achieve, that's very significant. You're talking about at least a third of the interest cost on that restructuring. So the only issue that I would take with the committeewoman Ewald just said is that she was on the finance committee, she was the mayor last year, and she did not take any action to restructure that debt. So the debt restructuring, the savings, the ideas that are in this budget, it's very clear to people what has happened. There's been a shift in the majority, there's a shift in thinking, and there's a shift on prioritizing the taxpayers and the residents of this town, not only from a fiscal point of view, but also from getting projects done. And you're going to see that coming directly to you if you have been following along with the resolutions that we've been passing to take active interest in the things that touch our citizens, which is our open space, our recreational facilities, our municipal assets.
All right, can we go?
Can I just, sorry, I can't let you go. Just to clarify for those residents and homeowners and taxpayers watching and listening at home, this committee that sits up here and is elected by you has the ability to control exactly one thing and one thing only, which is our municipal tax rate, which increased by 20% over the last 2 years. That's a fact. Now, people can call up as many times as they want and say, oh, it's only a couple $100. And by the way, a couple $100 might be a lot to some of our residents who are living on fixed incomes or what have you. But to try and implicate that the factual statement that the municipal taxes that we have the ability to control somehow did not increase by 20% is just not something that we can let stand. And Mrs. Ewald acknowledged it. It's a fact. It's a fact. And people can differ about the reason or the justification or the validity, but I really would want the residents, the taxpayers, Chatham Township, to know that over the last 2 years, your municipal taxes that this committee has any ability to control did in fact increase by 20%.
All right, let's move on because we still do have to introduce our budget tonight. Is there anybody else?
No, we're done.
We're good. Okay. Can we now move on to the final adoption of ordinances and the public hearing for those ordinances? The first is ordinance 2022-04. You want to read it? Or what's the?
I can read the title.
Okay.
It's an ordinance of the ordinance of the Township of Chatham, County of Morris, State of New Jersey, to add Chapter 3, Section 15 regarding loitering in a public place.
All right, let's open the public hearing of citizens for this specific issue. Do I need to read the whole?
No.
The same rules apply? Am I good there?
Yes, same rules apply.
Same rules apply, okay, that covers me. Okay. Oh, yeah.
Hi, Maureen Kelly again. Regarding this ordinance, strikes me as an ordinance in search of a problem. I realize that it may have good intentions behind it, but the first thing I thought of when I read this was, you know, Chatham used to have a proclamation out in the hallway about how we were a welcoming community. And this seems to fly in the face of that, in that I'm wondering if it, even if you didn't intend this, that it kind of sends a message, we're building affordable housing. Are we doing something that's just ahead of time when we don't even know who's gonna live there, discriminate against those people and pick on them? And again, it may not be what the intent was, but it really smacks of that when I read it. And so I think that this ordinance doesn't need to be passed. Thank you.
Is there anything else? Anybody on Zoom?
Nope.
All right, let's close this public hearing. And can I get a motion to adopt this ordinance?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, any discussion?
Beth? Sorry, yeah, I have a question for Mr. King. Mr. King, I had sent you an email a couple of weeks ago asking about the ACLU note that we received from a resident saying that State v. Crawley clearly indicates that you can't have a loitering ordinance. Can you just address that?
Yes. So the case that was submitted by a member of the public was decided in 1982. Prior to 1982, in 1979, the code had changed to our current code, 2C criminal code. Prior, there was a loitering ordinance. Loitering was very vague. It was simply people standing around. And people can stand around. People can stand around on their private property. People stand around to watch football games, children at parks, in public properties. So it was very difficult, and in the new 2C criminal code, they said, we're not going to enforce that. There were some towns that tried to enforce it. One was Newark. Newark had an ordinance that they tried to, have an ordinance that kept people from loitering in private property. In fact, the Crowley case basically states, in the court found on one of the last pages, that the destructive behavior that occurs in non-public areas such as vacant lots and abandoned buildings, that's what they were trying to enforce. So the court struck down saying that you can't enforce in those types of places. Fast forward from 1982, the state then passed, the state legislature passed certain criminal codes. One is the loitering for purposes of illegal possession or selling of controlled dangerous substances. This was passed in 1992, 10 years thereafter. As we all know, times change. The legislature enacts certain laws and things that maybe weren't needed in the past, they change it. In addition, in 1997, 5 years after the loitering for illegal drugs or legal to try and buy legal controlled dangerous substances, they passed 2C 34-1.1, loitering for the purposes of engaging in prostitution. So now we see that the state legislature has gone back to loitering, but loitering for specific purposes, for doing specific things. In addition, there is a effective July 12th, 2005, obstructing or interfering with polling places, and it talks to or loitering or nearby polling places. So you have another ordinance that tries to control loitering. In addition, you have the Port Authority actually has a rules and regulations and ordinances talking about loitering at train stations, train property. It's peddling, soliciting, business, entertaining, begging, or loitering in air, bus, or marine terminals. You also have the state police has a bulletin where they talk about security initiatives indicators, and they talk about things for police to look at. And one of them is ordinance. So this is really born from 9/11 and the issues that happened there. So the state has gone into loitering. I also want to say that currently there is a loitering municipal ordinance about loitering, and what we're trying to do is clean it up. You have section 3-7.1. It's called disorderly conduct, but they have a definition of loitering, which is a little vague. I believe it's a little vague. So you have that on the books. I think from I want to say either 1997, it may have been, or 2011, under ordinance number 11-77, and then it was amended 90 by ordinance 9930. So you do have a loitering ordinance of some sorts on your books and have had it for a while. But the current ordinance, what we're trying to do is it's really a public safety type issue, quality of life type issue, where on public property, if someone is in a public area, loitering, just standing around, doing certain things. One of the certain things is interfering with people. Another one is if they're interfering traffic, or they're engaging in some type of activity that would be criminal nature, and that's found in section 3-15.4 regulations. Interfering with pedestrian traffic, vehicular traffic, in trying to engage someone in an altercation, interfering with athletic events, social events, those types of things. But even before the ordinance comes into effect, the police officer would have to go up to that person and ask them to cease that type of a behavior. And if they don't, then there's a violation. So there's two steps. It's just not a pure loitering. It's not a loitering at someone's private house. They can do what they want in their yard. This is if someone is doing this in our parks. If someone is around the bathroom at the park and going up to young kids, personally as a father, I want the police to be there and go to that person and say, what are you doing here? What's happening? And it could be very innocent. Maybe that person just needs help, at which time the police officer could help that person, if there's any type of issues with that person. So it's certainly not something to be used to affect negatively people, but it's meant to help the community at large. So I think that's a little bit of a long-winded statement, but there is a prior case, Orange versus Orange, Camacho, CAMARCO versus City of Orange, where a similar structured ordinance was found not to be vague, and it was properly upheld. I will say that I did send the ordinance to both the county prosecutor and the attorney general. The county prosecutor deferred it to the attorney general, but again, I don't see any issue with it based on basically what I've said and provided to you.
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, this came up, there is a current problem that is going on, and we want to do anything we possibly can to make sure that our residents are safe. That's our number one most important job over taxes, over every other thing, is making sure our residents are safe. And if this can help our police, for it. Plain and simple, it's not about not being a welcoming community or anything like that. It's about safety and it's about our quality of life. And that's where I stand.
I also think that our chief of police has looked this over and has, it makes it easy for his job.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, he was included in all these discussions, as well as our municipal prosecutor. Both of them were included when these were drafted and reviewed and everything. So, anybody else have anything to add?
I just have a follow-up question. When I spoke to the chief initially, he had mentioned that there were some panhandling issues at ShopRite, and that this would allow him, instead of when he needs to pursue these types of situations a little more aggressively, that he only had trespassing available to him, although this ordinance or this loitering ordinance has been on the books in a different form. But I guess the question I have for you is, ShopRite being a private property, given that was kind of what initiated some of this, would that be covered under the loitering ordinance? Or it's only on public property?
No, section 315.4E makes it unlawful for a person to loiter private property that is customarily used for commercial purpose by the public with the purpose of interfering with or obstructing the free flow of pedestrian traffic. I think that, a place that is private but open to the public is essentially part of the public square. And again, I think an important point that Mr. King raised and pointed out in the ordinance is the enforcement component of the ordinance specifically says that it's more or less, I'm paraphrasing a bit, but enforceable upon somebody who refuses to disperse, basically. So it basically allows for township law enforcement to approach somebody who's acting in a way that is disruptive and for no lawful purpose, and telling them to stop and go away. And sort of sounds kind of simplistic, but it'd be very easy technically for somebody to say, well, it's a public park, I can do whatever I want. It's a public place. Technically, you can't do whatever you want if it's for no legal purpose and it's obstructing and interfering with other people.
And any other comments? Mark, did you have a comment? All right, let's move to vote.
Mrs. Ewald,
Yes.
Mrs. Vadenko,
Yeah.
Mr. Lewis,
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Hamilton,
Yes.
and Mayor Felice.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Okay, the next ordinance we have on our agenda this evening is ordinance 2022-05. Can you read that?
Yes, this is an ordinance of the Township of Chatham, County of Morris, City, New Jersey, adding Chapter 3, Section 16, adopting standards for security cameras.
Okay, let's open the public comment section on this ordinance. The same rules apply as was previously read. Is there nobody here? Is there anyone on Zoom?
Yes.
Okay.
Michael?
Thank you. Mike Kelly, Mountain Avenue. I'd like to add my comment to a comment that was made before about the reduction of two public comment sessions to one public comment session. I think that's a decrease in public comment. But I'd like to tie it into this ordinance because you're having the public comment session right now on this ordinance without any explanation of what the ordinance is intended to accomplish, why it's being done, and how it's going to be implemented, and which puts the public at a serious disadvantage to speak intelligently about it. But understanding that you've put us in this position, let me just ask, what are the developments that will be affected by this security camera ordinance? It says any development of 8 or more units. So I guess the question is, does the enclave over on Hillside Avenue, will that be affected by it? Will the affordable housing at the DPW and police department, will that be affected by this? And will the proposed affordable housing at the Charlie Brown site be affected by it? Because I guess my concern is that if either of those two affordable housing developments are the only developments that are going to be required to put security cameras up, then I've got to tell you that from the audience's perspective, this seems like a very, very negative action by the Township Committee to implement something like this on affordable housing and not implementing it on other developments that are currently underway or other apartment complexes that have been in the town for years. Again, I hope that I'm misunderstanding this and it's not just going to be implemented on the affordable housing. But if that is, I've got to tell you, it comes across to the public as appearing to be discriminatory, and I hate to see that happening in a town like Chatham Township that previous administrations have really gone out of their way to try to be welcoming and to everyone. So I hope you can shed some light on that question and hopefully put my concerns at rest. Thank you.
I'm going to defer to Mr. King on the NLUL basic question here, that he's asking, but really, when you're talking about Arbor Green, you're talking about a affordable housing complex that's directly next to our DPW and our police station, which are already heavily surveilled with exterior cameras. So there's a lot of cameras over there already. However, in my understanding, that these security cameras would, this ordinance would, was far after the permitting process and the application for all of these things, and that's how MLUO runs. So absolutely, this was not intended to target anyone, and the implication of that is, you know, we can show better faith, I think, in each other than that.
I agree.
Well, if I could just add,
Sorry.
that, you know, I don't really see any daylight whatsoever in the language, all newly constructed residential dwelling units, all.
Over 8 units.
So, yeah, but whether they cost $1 million each or they're affordable housing. you
Is
know.
that gonna include the places down on the hillside?
Well, as Mr. Lowe's just talked about, it's hard to make this retroactive on places that have already been approved. And
It's already been-
fully through the planning process.
I agree with them.
Essentially, since it's already been approved, we're not going backwards and punishing people that have already been approved. This is all for newly constructed.
Well, I just want to say.
I also think the spirit of adopting the ordinance, it then makes it easy for us to we work collaboratively with developers and say, this is how things work. I mean, like Mr. Lowe said, I think we can have better faith to this. I read it as all in the future, and frankly, I would be shocked if the residents of the place over on Hillside are not security cameraed up to their eyeballs already. But you know.
So
certainly
again,
know.
it's prospective, it's not retrospective. It's 8 dwelling units. It doesn't pick what ones or who's living in there. 10,000 square foot or more of commercial space. Driving behind the shop, right, you look up, you see all the cameras there. You see cameras outside. The Starbucks, there's cameras there. And in apartments, when you go to any apartment, there's cameras outside there. We live in an age of cameras, and they're not a bad thing if you're a law-abiding citizen. They're not peering into your house, but they're out in the public, and they've helped. They help in cases where if you do go to a supermarket, you come out and there's a big gash in your car, you can call the police. Those stores usually have surveillance of their parking lots. With this ordinance, it'll be definitely surveilled. And you can see who hit your car. And I've prosecuted cases of hit and runs, and the video is wonderful. If you go to any the ShopRites, they have not only great cameras, but they have facial recognition systems that people don't know about. So when they see someone who stole something and got away, that goes out through all their stores. The big chain stores have it.
And most people have Ring doorbells these days, or the Nest doorbells that have the cameras onto them as well. I mean, all this is doing is for the larger dwelling units. It's not targeting affordable housing by any means. It's literally any complex. It could be multi-million-dollar townhomes. If there's more than 8 units, it's just, if it's 8 units or more, put some cameras up.
And it's really for the protection of the people
It's
who live there.
for protection,
Because they're
right?
the ones that, you know, people will come have broken into houses, broken into their vehicles. It helps them, it helps the police, it helps us all. And again, you know, if some child could be saved, if some person could be saved by a quick response of seeing something on a video, again, as a father, I would be in favor of such an ordinance.
Yeah. Go ahead, Stacey.
Yeah, I mean, just to help close the gap there in terms of, because I got a number of calls from residents regarding the last meeting and this discussion, and the thing that was alarming to them was there was a discussion, and I, you know, had prompted it based on my conversations, you know, with the chief and my understanding of the ordinance, and I've had a change of heart on this whole thing. But in looking at whether or not we could add language for any major renovations. So if there's large scale renovations, that at that point, cameras would be requested. And the conversation shifted to ask if we would be able to to request, since they're still in the middle of planning board hearings, 522 Southern Boulevard, to have cameras. But the same discussion did not take place with about Dixie-Dale, even though that's in the middle of construction. So I think that's where residents were coming from. There was an immediate swoop into, cameraing up 522 Southern Boulevard. Mr. King, I would appreciate if you would speak more to the litigation concerns. I mean, you've delved into some of the policy discussion, which I really think is up to the committee. But in terms of litigation, when it comes to cameras and privacy rights, is there any insight you could share there?
Yes, so if you're out on public streets, there are no rights. Any public space, like this meeting right now, someone from the public could come in here and record it. The state has said that you have to allow them as long as that recording equipment doesn't affect the meeting. If you come into this municipal building, you pass 3 cameras before you get into the main office area. There's 2 out front, and then there's 1 outside the main door. We have that right because, again, this is a public space, and it just helps to identify who's coming in and who's going out.
I'm sorry, I've lost sound. Can you hear me? Hello?
Yeah, and you can have that in any public space, other than, of course, a bathroom, but any public space.
I'll have additional comments when it's our turn to talk, but I understand we're still in the public hearing session, so I'll hold them until later.
No, I think we closed
Yeah,
it.
we're
We're in the discussion section.
We're in discussion now? Okay. I guess, this started feeling a little bit like Big Brother watching as I started talking to residents more and more. The original discussion with the police chief came about for 2 reasons. One, he talked about how we have 3 cameras in town on intersections that help solve some really big and concerning crimes. I think we can continue to support that in public areas with additional cameras if that will help. The other thing that came up was in the commercial district, he had talked about oil that was being stolen behind one of the shops, $3,000 worth of oil. And in thinking that through initially, I thought, well, better to have the large scale developer responsible for those cameras than for the small mom and pop shop. But the reality is, which everybody spoke to already, anybody could put up an Arlo or a Ring camera. The other reality is the biggest crime we have in Chatham Township is the theft of cars at private residents. And we're not requiring private residents to put up Ring cameras, even though everything you argued about protecting property and protecting person would be facilitated, but we don't do it there. And I agree we should not. But I don't think we should, if it was a commercial ordinance only, I would support it. But I don't think we should apply it to personal property, and I have some concerns about individuals' private property rights.
It's 8 units.
So I spoke to the chief. There is an ordinance where their private homeowners can register on a list advising that they have cameras. So for a specific street, if let's say 4 residents registered, there's a car theft there, the police can go to those residents and ask them. It's not compulsory. They can ask them and they can voluntarily give that information. Again, most people they feel it's their civic duty. They will turn that information over to the police, and it has solved crimes. So there is that registry. The chief advised me that there is that registry currently on your books, and that's
yes. So you just argued my point for me that it would make sense then to require residents, individual property owners, to have cameras then. So, I mean, you're making my point for me. It says if we don't think it applies to individual property owners, why do we think it applies to apartment, dwellers? Because basically that's what we're saying. So I don't Again, it very much has the marks of Big Brother watching. I don't support this ordinance, and the language you just talked about in section C, that even if you guys decide to pass it, because clearly there are 3 who have the majority here, but the language is misleading. It says recordings from the surveillance required by the circles shall be made available to Chatham Township Police Department in the event the recordings are needed for investigation. It doesn't say that voluntarily, it's a voluntary submission unless compelled by subpoena. So if you're going to proceed with it, I suggest you include that language. We complain all the time about ordinances that are confusing and misleading, and we're about to adopt language, not me, that is confusing and misleading to residents and anybody who's trying to comply with our ordinances.
Yeah, again, I think this is a policy. Do you want to help the police solve crimes and protect your residents, or you just want to not do that? So I think it's a policy issue, and each of the elected members can choose how they want to vote on it.
I agree. I think it's ultimately, we need to give all of the police all the tools that they can possibly have. So Greg, can we go to a vote?
Can I just,
Can we get a motion? Oh,
can
sorry.
I just address one really quick comment there?
Yeah.
By Mr. Tebow, where it says, the language that she read, I zoomed on that language too, and I just want to point out that it says, it shall be made available to the police, the Chatham Township Police Department in the event the recordings are needed for an investigation. That establishes a threshold requirement that the recordings be needed for the purpose of an investigation, which is the law of the land in the United States. You can't just like go and barge into somebody's house or somebody's apartment building and take the security camera. It has to be needed for the purpose of an investigation, which means that it's not like we're going to be watching every day what's going on there. But if the crime occurs at or around a dense apartment development and it is determined that the security footage could assist the police in their investigation, then they can get that hit. I support this.
Yep.
Yeah, and again, we can, going back to Mr. King's point, we can support the police by having cameras in more public spaces. This is a requirement for private developments to have cameras as well.
Okay, thank you, Mark.
Yeah, I'm just gonna say, thank you, Mr. Hamilton, you answered my question and are needed for investigation. So, yeah, there is a qualifier there, and that's a beautiful thing, because I am not into overtaxing people or compelling them to do anything. But in the event of investigation, then there is some cause for it. So that makes a lot of sense. It makes me very comfortable with it.
Okay, can we go?
Just one last point, and I'll let it go, which is there's also an element of public safety for the residents of denser than we're used to property developments, and also the budgetary concerns of developers. More or less cutting corners. Maybe somebody is building a development, and I'm not saying anybody would do this, but maybe somebody's building a development, they want to build it as cheaply as possible and fill it up with people and move along. And we want to make sure that the people who are moving in there are protected. And this is one measure of when we can make sure that they are adequately safe. And that it's harder to see what's going on in a parking lot behind a building or whatever. And we want to make sure that people who are developing those types of projects, provide adequate safety tools for the people who are going to be moving into them.
Yep, all right, let's go to the.
I would like to make a motion to adopt
Thank you.
ordinance 2022-05.
Second.
All right, now let's go to the vote. I thought I already did that.
Mrs. Ewald,
No.
Mrs. Findaco,
I'm just saying no because I know too many people that are opposed.
Mr. Lewis,
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Hamilton,
Yes.
and Mayor Fleece.
Yes.
And that's probably the only apartment dweller in the room. Thank you.
Well, all right, now we are going to the introduction of ordinances. So we're looking, ordinance 2022-03, recapping ordinance. Bob, do you want to give us some information?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. I want to thank the Township Committee for agreeing to postpone the introduction of this until this evening. The Township Committee received an email from me dated March 10th, which provided additional information about the reasons for the cap bank ordinance and some of the reasons that it helps in the planning process. And I'd like to indicate that the cap bank ordinance is an insurance policy for future budgets. The Township Committee, if they need to exercise any issues with the cap bank ordinance, it's within their authority. They have the authority to implement it. They have the authority to make sure that actions are taken through that. So the Township Committee can choose to utilize it in the future. And if any action is taken, they would have to vote on it. It's not something that's automatic. And this is something that has been adopted in 15 of the past 17 budget years.
All right,
So thank you.
can I get a motion to introduce?
So moved, sorry.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay. Discussion? So,
I'll just say, you know, we have the budget presentation, it's 9 o'clock, we're introducing this, I appreciate the additional information that you gave us, and, you know, I'm all for introducing it, and we can look into it and consider it a little more.
that's kind of where I'm at, where I would rather, you know, I'm okay with moving forward with the introduction of it. And then we'll hear about the budget presentation after, and then next week next meeting, we can decide if we want to move forward on adopting the capping ordinance. That's kind of where I'm at, but, all right, can we get it?
I'd just like to say that, I was opposed to this earlier, I'm still opposed to it, and what I would just say about it is, I think that the precedent of this town has for a long time been very, very low, if any, tax rate increases, 0%, 1%. So if you look back over a 15-year period, and you were to give me the average of tax rate increases, you would be looking at single digits, maybe not even a single digit, maybe a fractional digit. So to pass this in an environment where that is the will of the committee is one thing. To pass this in the environment of a committee that's looked at a 20% tax increase over the past 2 years is entirely different. So I don't think the precedent of the past applies.
All right, can we go to a vote?
Mrs. Ewell,
Yes.
Mrs. Fundaco,
Yes.
Mr. Lewis,
No.
Deputy Mayor Hamilton,
Yes.
and Mayor Felice.
Yes.
Motion passes. Public hearing on April 12th.
All right, now we go to the introduction of the 2022 municipal budget. I leave the floor to you.
Yeah, we just need 2 minutes.
Yep.
Break or you want me to-
Would you
adjourn?
we can take a temporary adjournment?
Yep.
Plus we can go to the bathroom. Some of us have been drinking water for the past 3 hours. Right?
Keep it in there so you don't go on.
Because they know how rodeo is.
I knew. I knew exactly what kind of rodeo.
I'm gonna go to my.
By the way, Greg, it's 1, 2, 3, yes. 1, 2, 3, yes.
Yeah, the time to ask me is not in the middle of the meeting. The sheets on my desk.
Every other time I just automatically put me on, this time it won't let me go.
I know, I had to type it in. I wanted to change the password from guess 1, 2, 3 to 1, 2, 3 dash. Probably what it was. You know, it expired, so they reversed it. And all of us were like, no, we logged in.
Oh, okay, yeah.
You know what I mean? They reversed it just because.
No, I get it, I see.
It's fast, it's only 10 slides, I cut it down to 10 slides.
So it's about 25 minutes.
So I'll speak real slow. All yours. Greg, should I, this looks good. Should I move it back a little to make it bigger or? Okay.
No.
All right, then I'll just move.
Move
it
over
here.
forward.
Let you know over there about
Is that?
the chair.
No, I guess I'll borrow Peter's.
And for what it's worth, Bob, Rangers and Devils have 12 minutes left in the third period, so take as much time as you need.
Who's winning?
Devils are up 5-3.
Damn it, I'm sorry.
Okay, you're done.
That's a big win.
There you go. Oh, my bad, chair.
Sean, I'm gonna borrow your microphone.
Yep.
You guys need more time.
This is the 2-minute.
Okay, what do you want to go?
2 minutes.
Come on, right?
Maybe just put this on the website.
Yep, we can.
All right. I need one more committee person. Mark? Mr. Phillips? Mike? Oh. I don't think so. We're good. Yeah, John just got it.
John, did you want to go?
Unless you want to, well, watch the budget.
That's fine.
Oh, we have the. consent.
Nope.
Trying to help you out.
I was getting Chatham work done. It was-
And I don't know, this is like some people's torture.
I was working on Chatham. So it's good.
There you go.
Whatever it's called. Good night, everyone.
Good night.
Thank you.
Thanks for the bill down.
Let's,
Thanks for the bill down.
all right, Bob, are you ready?
I'm ready. Yes, ma'am.
Okay, let's move forward with the budget presentation, introduction.
All right, thank you, Madam Mayor.
Just for the record, we do have our third member.
Yes,
Go back.
and, no, we're good.
All right.
Okay, go ahead.
All right. Thank you, Madam Mayor. Tonight, we have the Township's 2022 budget introduction. The budget hearing will be on April 26th. At that time, the Township will answer questions from the public, and the public hearing on the budget will take place then. So this is the budget schedule. Tonight, we have the introduction. There's the hearing on the 26th, as I indicated. On the 26th, we're scheduled to introduce capital budget ordinances so that we can move forward with road paving and with other significant projects. There'll be a public hearing on the capital ordinances on May 10th. There's an estoppel period, and then we hope to award contracts by June 14th. The challenges for the 2022 budget outside of the municipality have to do with supply chain delays. The cost of oil, there are surcharges that will be on our road paving projects, so we will have to take a closer look at those, but some of those surcharges on our road paving will be significant. And then we will be looking at the cost of inflation on our projects. The local tax rate for the budget this year is flat. So on a house that's valued at $841,000, the local tax rate will remain the same at 3.21. The open space will remain the same at 0.020, and the library has a slight tax increase for this year. So on that average home of $841,000, the annual increase would be $16.82, and that's for the services that are provided by our joint library. The operating budget for this year, and this slide has changed, the total appropriations, I will make a change. There was a 6 o'clock change to that, but the total appropriations will be $16,703,836.80. That's a reduction of $11,700 from the number that's on the slide, and that was something that just came as we were comparing it to the state budget document. So our capital improvements are going to be $1,005,000. Our in-cap expenses are $12,292,855.29. Our debt, as you had heard earlier, is going to be $1,167,433 or $473. And then our out-of-cap expenses are $2,238,508.56. Some of the key sources that we have for funding are we're using $3 million from fund balance, just as we have done last year and in previous years. We had a good year in our construction office, so UCC fees, we are anticipating $500,000 this year. That's $75,000 more than we had anticipated in 2021. And the Township Committee may recall that in August of last year, we saw an increase of 49.6% in our plumbing fees, just for the additions that were happening in our community. The Township Committee will hopefully adopt a resolution that will support the energy receipts tax. Since 2011, it has remained the same at $836,467. Some of the capital improvements that we anticipate will be road paving, a repair to putting on a new roof here at the municipal building. The roof, the township should know that the roof is 34 years old. It had a 20-year life expectancy, so the township received its money's worth from the current roof, and we're looking forward to receiving the money's worth from the future roof. There has been some discussion about putting a zip line off the top of the roof to go into the great swamp so that we can have some revenue that's naturally occurring, but we're still looking at that. There's also been a discussion about perhaps growing hops on the roof for a beer garden, but we'll talk about that later. We're going to be doing some recreation upgrades as well. The recreation upgrades have to do with improvements here at the municipal field at the municipal building with some netting so that the fields can be used for soccer, for lacrosse, for baseball practices, and also in other parks, so that we can make sure that we open up the bathrooms at Shunpike. We're going to be doing some upgrades there involving some security cameras and things of that nature, but we're looking at some significant upgrades this year. And then we always invest in the fire department. Both of our fire departments are volunteer fire departments, and we try and support them to the best of our ability. And so each year we make investments and put money aside for future capital equipment and assist with their ongoing needs. So the breakdown of our tax bill is that if that average home that's valued at $841,000 has a property tax bill, when you include all of the pieces of the pie, of $16,412. The municipal portion, which is the portion that the township controls, is $3,162 for 2022. So when you look at this slide on the side, you will see what is the value that is being that you're receiving for your tax dollars. So there's recycling pickup, there's road plowing, and there's repairs to catch basins, things like that. There's the park maintenance. There's several other things that are going on. So I will not go through the whole list, but we will go into that more in depth at the public hearing if so desired. And then we've received grants. So we have a recycling tonnage grant that has come in. We have a grant to repave Fairmont Avenue, and that's $268,000. We received a grant to create a new walking path from the Green Village Post Office over towards Nash Field. And this is the first phase of that grant. This is to help design it, and then there will be future grants so that we can construct the walking path and bike path. And then we also received the body armor replacement grant for our police department. And then last but not least, we received funding from the American Rescue Plan. So we are on target to receive $1,058,931.77. We received half of that last year, and sometime after June of this year, we will receive the second payment of $529,465.89. And we anticipate using those funds for helping to replace the roof and some HVAC improvements to this building, as well as some improvements to our sewer treatment plant system. And then again, that's the introduction for our municipal budget. And we will be answering questions on the 26th of April. I should mention that this year is the year that the state must review our budget documents. Once every 3 years, the state does an in-depth review of the budget. The other 2 years, the municipality can do a self-evaluation. So this is the year that we need to send it down to the state and have them review it before we can have the public hearing for the adoption of the budget. They have to let us know that they've reviewed it and they're okay with, they have signed off on it. So thank you very much, and that's the presentation.
Thank you very much, Bob, and I think a tremendous thank you goes out to our entire finance committee, our committee woman Ewald, committee woman Lois, as well as our CFO and our auditors. I think you did a fantastic job this year, and we really owe it all to all of you guys. So really, and Bob, of course, thank you to you too.
No, it's fine. Yeah. No, Mayor, thank you very much, because as I was getting up, I really appreciate you thanking our team, because it means more coming from you than it does from me. So I do
Well,
appreciate
honestly,
it.
we really appreciate. I know these things take hundreds of hours to put together, and it is well. I know our residents appreciate it. I know us as a committee appreciates it, and sincerely thank you, all of you. Anybody have anything they want to say?
Yeah, we may have set a record, I don't know, that's my first year doing this, but 12 versions of the budget seems like a lot.
That's about 4 years worth of versions.
So, okay, so our most seasoned professional in the room says we did 4 years worth of work in 1 year, so I really, I am very appreciative of hard work. I respect hard work, and the effort that goes into it does not go unnoticed, and I do deeply appreciate it. Regardless of maybe difficulties that I am to work with. Okay, so I really appreciate it. Thank you.
I also want to thank Mr. Hoffman and our CFO, Deb King. They really have, worked hard this round, but every round that I've known of them, and they to do the best by our taxpayers. So I appreciate all the work and all the things they kind of planned out over the last few years to get us to where we are. Because it's gone through so many versions, and I think 4 of them were just this last couple of days. So I do have a couple of questions just to get some clarification. And I'm guessing Deb King is going to have to answer these. At this point, what are we charging off to the Open Space Trust? And what is fully authorized, and what are we still exploring in terms of what can be charged off to the Open Space Trust? Moved from the operating budget, that is, to the Open Space Trust.
The items that were moved over from the operating budget over to the open space.
Yes.
It was 215,000 that was moved from the DPW salary and wage operating, was moved over to open space to cover their maintenance of the fields and whatnot that are on the Rossi, along with 100. It was all of the colony pool salary and wage and other expenses were also moved over to the open space, along with the revenues that go along with the colony pool. All of the revenues have to go over with the salary and wage, other expenses, because they go together. So all of
That makes sense.
yeah,
That makes
all
sense.
to the open space, which then we have to make adjustments to our cap banks. So that is why we won't be able to show the publication of the introduced budget until we get clarification from the state. These are some things we haven't done in the past, so we're trying to get clarification before we can show it to the public, because there are 2 pages in the budget that we still have to update. So we have to make cap bank adjustments because we're moving such large amounts of operating expenses over to open space, because one's in the cap and one is outside of the cap. So we have to make adjustments to our cap banks. So in order to do that, we're getting some clarification. So it doesn't affect how we budget or the tax rate, but it will affect the banks and such for next year. When you have a cap, what you don't use goes into a bank. And so you have to make sure that you're staying within the cap. And with the adjustment, we still need to make sure we're staying within our cap, which from what Val and I have calculated, we should be. That won't be the problem. It's a matter of how much we're going to be able to carry into next year. Anybody have any questions on that?
So one question I had, there was some question as to whether or not the recycling center, because it's on the Rossi, although it's not really rec and maintenance and rec, but was that included in the? Was that removed?
The compost, any kind of working of the compost, eligible for open space. Only maintenance of the grounds, but not for like men working the compost. That does not qualify, is not eligible. And we also confirm that with the state.
Okay.
And the same thing would go for our recreation director. That
I'm sorry, I can't hear you, the recreation director?
Even though it's not. No, not at the moment. If it was to be, we just clarified things with the state.
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear part of that. The rec director cannot be charged to open space?
No.
Okay.
Some of the things we've contacted the state in regards to.
Okay, so I just want to make sure. So the amount from DPW, Colony Pool, that was everything that was moved over, you're confident that you're going to be able to substantiate those dollars that got moved over to open space, because there's no money in the operating budget any longer for that, for those salary and wages?
Correct.
Okay, thanks.
Funds that are in excess of the revenues that come in for the colony pool will also remain in open space fund. Those will not be now revenues into surplus of the general fund.
Great. And then the other question, there were late changes with well, a couple of questions actually. We had some salary discussions, which we can't talk about, but are those included in the budget? Were those factored into the budget?
Yes.
Okay. And then the last item, there were some late changes in the fire department, and there was just a lot of emails back and forth. Between you and Ms. Ralphin, can you go through what the numbers were, what the additional items requested were, and then it looks like we're at the max now. I just want to understand what's making up that number.
Well, we had a request for additional funds where it says contribution. That is a maximum that we could contribute based on a local finance notice from the state. So that's a maximum. Anything additional is has to be held through our budget, and we control the funds. So it's just a matter of if they're purchasing any equipment, those equipments need to be held, the titles need to be held by the township, not the fire department. So usually it's maintenance and whatnot that we, additional funds that we contribute. The contribution gets made over to them, and they have to show an accounting for all of the expenses that they use those funds for.
I know Mr. Lois had asked, there were some items that he thought were already in the capital budget. Were those removed from the request because they were already factored into the capital budget?
What you see in operating is the balance of their budget, not including capital. That will be a separate item when we do the capital ordinance.
Okay. Oh, and I'm sorry, the last set of questions under utilities. I know you had to increase gasoline, and we all agree that makes sense to double that number. You initially had wanted to increase some of the other utility numbers. Based on what you're hearing on increases, do you feel like you have enough money there? I mean, the jump in electricity relative to last year's actual is pretty big. The other ones are a little tighter. So I just wanted to find out what you're hearing in your, when you're talking to other CFOs and other municipalities, and whether or not you're comfortable you have enough money in utilities.
Like everyone's concerned, gasoline is the highest increase currently that everyone's concerned with. They're seeing double the rate currently over last year for municipalities buying in bulk. The rates have almost doubled. So that's definitely a concern like it is for everyone else. I do see, that there will probably be some increases to electricity, which we did have a nice remainder last year in reserve. So I see that we should be able to sustain that this year. Everything else, nothing is predicted at this point with what's going to go up. We're seeing increases to groceries, and for what we're budgeting, it's more would always be nice, but it's all an estimate.
Oh, let me just answer one question. Just on some of the utilities, we have a 5-year contract for street lighting, so that number is fairly solid. We've gone out to bid, and we were able to receive a 5-year contract for the cost of kilowatt hours for the street lights. We have a contract for electricity, and that contract is expiring in June, but we were able to receive a significant discount on our kilowatt hours for use here in our municipal facilities. So what we're looking at is we're looking ahead, seeing what the rate is, and we may wind up going with JCP&L just to make sure that we have a rate that's locked in and controlled by the Board of Public Utilities. So that's part of the analysis that we're doing now, and the electricity funds that we have in the budget, if the rate increases stay stable with JCP&L, we should be able to handle them, but that's something that we need to look at over the next couple of weeks.
Great. Is there anything else? So can I get a motion to adopt the, to introduce, excuse me.
It's a motion to adopt the resolution to introduce the budget.
Okay, so is it right? Okay, can I get a motion to adopt the introduction of the municipal budget? Second, okay, we got a second? All right, can we get a vote?
Mrs. Ewald,
Yes.
Mrs. Fandako.
Yes.
Mr. Lois.
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Hamilton.
Yes.
Mayor Fleece.
Yes.
Motion passes.
All right, great work, guys.
And the public hearing will be on the 26th. So, Mr. Carr, if you're watching, you can ask all your questions in.
All right, now we're gonna move to the consent agenda.
Want me to read the list?
Sure. That'd be great.
This evening we have Resolution 2022-94, appointing risk manager, 2022-104, receipt of reports, 105, approving minutes of meetings, 106, approving executive session minutes, 107, approving list of volunteers eligible for LoSAP, 108, authorizing conditional offer of employment for police officer, 109, authorizing RFQ for engineering for DMT project, 110, energy tax receipts, 111, emergency temporary budget extension, 112, supporting historical society grant application. 113, authorizing auction of surplus equipment. 114, Nashville conduit restoration. 115, Mountain View baseball field netting, and 116, library capital contribution.
Can I get a motion to adopt?
I just have one question, I'm sorry about this, but, resolution 2022-115, it's Mountain View baseball field netting, it references the funding source, and it says, it doesn't say joint rec trust, it says, or maybe it does, let me just, hold on. It says, oh no, it does say joint recreation trust fund, I just read recreation trust fund. Yeah, but I discovered in the last few days that we have two. That one is the joint, right? We're talking about JRAC.
Yes,
JRAC.
yes, we are.
Perfect. Can I get a motion to adopt all the consent agenda?
So moved.
And second? Okay, can I get a roll call vote?
Just one other just quick comment. I probably should mention this yesterday, but I just wanted to draw attention to resolution number 16 on the consent agenda. Just because this goes by fast for the residents at home, that the committee is moving forward with anything that the library of the Chatham, the joint library of the Chatham request for funding from the township, and so we're happy to do that.
All right, roll call vote.
Mrs. Ewell,
Yes.
Mrs. Fandako,
Yes.
Mr. Lois,
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Hamilton,
Yes.
and Mayor Felice.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Now, can I get a motion to adopt resolution 2022-117 pre-qualifying pilot activities?
So moved.
Okay, any discussion? All righty, can we get a roll call?
Mrs. Ewell,
Yes.
Mrs. Fandako,
Yes.
Mr. Lois,
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Hamilton,
Yes.
and Mayor Felice.
Yes.
Motion passes.
So the last item on our agenda is a discussion on film permits. This came about, well, maybe Bob, you can give us the background. There's essentially, film crews have been coming around to various different towns, not just in Chatham, but other local towns. I know they've been in Long Hill, Madison, Chatham Borough, looking to film in our property, and we were discussing the possibility of implementing an ordinance that would give some regulation to that if a company wanted to come in to film.
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor. This is something that every once in a while a company will come in, they want to do a commercial at somebody's house. There was right up here on Mountain View, there was a Christmas commercial that was filmed for a candy. So that was done probably 18 months ago. Greg and I have been approached by representatives of different film companies looking for houses to film at, or inquiring about where they can film, if they can film on municipal property in the Great Swamp. And we really don't have regulations about that. And we were looking at making sure we can protect our residents, and that we also have some kind of a fee structure, so that if somebody wants to come into town to film, they know what the cost would be. But we can also tell them that you can't have generators going at 3 o'clock in the morning, and you can't have big Klieg lights up so that you can create sunlight when it's 3 o'clock in the morning. And just we want to be able to have a holistic look. And
I think it's important if they're blocking streets, to make sure that our DPW is taken care of, and that the costs associated with blocking off the streets with our police and everybody is reimbursed.
So, Mayor, these calls typically come through me, since it's typically the clerk's office that would issue such permits if we have them, which many towns do. So at present, when I do get the calls, the most I'm able to tell them is, one, that they have to adhere to the Board of Health's noise ordinance, which we do advise them of that. And I refer them to the police department to coordinate any road closures or anything like that. traffic control, but it would be nice for us to have some idea of what's going on with filming, because theoretically someone could just come in and start filming and we don't know about it since we don't require a permit. And also, you know, if the police have to go out to do any traffic control, having a permit fee associated with it would help offset those costs.
Yeah, I mean, it makes sense to me.
So now I'm just, I guess it doesn't come up that often, but I'm a little bit surprised almost that we don't have anything in place right now, because I immediately thought of traffic control as such. So in the instances that we have have the police been involved, and did we not get compensated?
Oh, well, I'll let Chief address that, but it seems like in the past 2-3 years, we've had more interest in filming in Chatham Township than in the 10 years prior. It's, you know, typically rare that anybody comes here looking to film, but recently we've had some feature films looking to do some filming in town, and you know, FX has contacted me a few times in recent months looking to do some filming for TV series. So
no, I think this is definitely something we should be exploring. I know they had a feature film shoot in the borough last summer. That was extensive. I mean, they had Red Road closed for like weeks, basically. You know?
That same film. I think it's the same one that you're referring to that had shown interest in Chatham Township as well. I don't recall if they did any actual filming here, but they were doing quite a bit in the area.
The budget's local time. Sorry, go ahead.
Well, so they, a TV show was shooting on my street. I live on Gates Avenue, it's much been publicized. And the street I live on is a loop. And as it being a loop, there was some need to have some sort of a tracking of a car. And the car was doing loops on my street for about 4 hours. And they had a drone overhead that was shooting it, and they needed this continuous monotony, I guess, of doing this. I'm not sure why they do it, but they were marrying it with shots of a home I being party. Okay, so that's my long-winded intro to say, I think there's a monumental difference between a low-budget film student project and a, something starring, Tom Hanks or something like this. So whatever we do, we need to carefully craft it, that there are levels of filmmaking, and also with the miniaturization of equipment and a lot of less need for lighting. These productions, even on a sophisticated level, are not what they used to be in terms of equipment and whatnot. So in terms of you could have a production of a trailer and 2 cars, and that constitutes a film shoot. That's way different than so we need to, whatever we do, I don't want to discourage the small creative body, the small creative person, the small enterprise. That's a lot of that's how people get started. It's also what started this country, and there's so many levels, and we have to be sensitive to that. That's a task.
Yeah, it's like everything else. I mean, I think we want to be on top of it, but don't discourage it either.
Right.
Yeah, this could be an opportunity for the committee to set appropriate regulations to have that balance between wanting to encourage the industry, but also have appropriate protections on the neighbors.
Yeah.
That's why we're bringing it up now, and that's why we have our township attorney who's going to be, taking a look at this and asking good questions and doing research and.
Can you see what the towns are doing? And
Some cameras in
Well, he's offered to go to Montclair and try and meet with Richard Gearing and Susan Sarandon. They're up there right now.
Actually, late.
Well, you can't.
We all know what's going on in Montclair.
Is there any other discussions? Are we all on board with at least looking into something like this? Yeah. All right. Well, then I guess we can get a motion to close the meeting? And all in favor? We have no executive session tonight, so we're good to go. All in favor, sorry.
Aye.
Aye.
We're
All
done
right.
before 10 o'clock.
Thank you very much this
Wow.
evening, that's impressive. Have a wonderful evening, and we're back in a couple weeks.